Is ADHD or CPTSD keeping you from fully enjoying the sensations of your pelvic floor? Stay tuned because in this episode, I'm going to share with you how somatic movement can help you safely resensitize this very intimate area of your body. And I'm going to also share three very practical exercises. This is Candia Raquel. I am a Mexican sensualist, scientist, and artist that could only eat tacos for the rest of my life. And you are at the Sensual Sessions Podcast, the place to explore sensing pleasure through your senses and moving in a way that it's free from inhibition and full of delightful self expression. So perhaps you've already tried Kegels or any other kind of exercise for the pelvic floor, only to find yourself frustrated with yet another prescriptive chore. Perhaps you just lost count, got distracted with an interesting thought, or maybe it made you feel like other times you felt not so good sensations in regards to your pelvic floor because you had simply non optimal, non happy experience with this area. So there is a reason why. When we have a certain kind of neurodivergence or neurospiciness, being ADHD or CPTSD or even high capacities, maybe you're gifted, and we didn't had the most supportive environment growing up, we tend to run on survival mode, which is kind of expensive for the nervous system, and also focus on scanning for threats. And the thing with the pelvic floor is that this set of muscles operate in two different modes. At will, which is via the voluntary nervous system, or on autopilot via the autonomic nervous system. So if we try to force ourselves into training the pelvic floor forcefully with a set of prescribed repetitions, this is going to get in conflict with the basic modus operandi that the pelvic floor needs to run. Why? Because the autonomous part of our nervous system that is very primitive, that has to do with the amygdala, with the reptilian brain, is either on chill mode of rest and digest, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, or it's in survival mode, scanning to ask, to find the answer to the question, is there anything around that's going to kill us? So if we already have like this default brain chemistry modus operandi of certain neurodivergence, like the practice is not gonna gel. And we, even worse, we run the risk of associating anything that we want to do to improve our pelvic floor with something that is threatening, forceful, and uncomfortable. So that's like the big picture. And yes, I'm gonna tell you the solution, but I don't want you to just trust me blindly. I want you to know the facts of why your body is responding this way and why we want a different, more specific approach so you can reconnect with your pelvic floor in an effective and, most importantly, in a pleasurable way. So, let me explain briefly how the nervous system works. So, we have two main ways. We have two hemispheres in the brain, and one part of the nervous system is voluntarily, like, for example, doing push-ups or clenching a muscle or anything like that. And the other side of the nervous system is autonomous. It organizes, for example, your heartbeat, your digestion, your sleep patterns. That's one aspect of this unconscious autonomic nervous system that is called the well, parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. So it has to do with the enteric functions of your organs, and there are two other kinds that are the parasympathetic, that is what we want when we work with the pelvic floor. We want a parasympathetic dominance. So this is a autonomic nervous system that has to do with rest and digest, has to do with sleep, with self-maintenance, with self-restoration, and it's very pleasurable. So, for example, after eating, you enter in a state of sopor, of digestion that is like very lofty. Or when you are falling asleep or waking up, you're in this languorous state of slow movement and drifting and expansiousness and like naturally letting go, opening, taking space, very sensuous. This is parasympathetic dominance of our autonomic nervous system. And this is where we want to be when we tend to the pelvic floor, because this happens only through the utter context of safety. Okay? So this is what we want. The problem is that we tend to run on the other part of our autonomic nervous system, that is survival mode, like always scanning, like emails, thinking, doing, to is there any problem? And having a very short attention span, like in video games, that is you just went through a falling bridge, didn't die, and you're just running away from the zombies and bracing for yet another catastrophe. Well, that's how we live in survival mode. And don't get me wrong, this is very important, it's necessary, and it really keeps you alive. It's either fighting, flighting, or freezing. Uh, we really need survival mode. The problem is that we can be stuck in survival mode. And it's not just like, okay, I'm gonna shift out of this. No, you can just do that because remember, it's autonomic, it's on autopilot, it's unconscious. So your conscious mind cannot do anything to make the. It's like when you're really pissed off, and especially if you're a Mexican woman and you're pissed off, and someone tells you calm down or you're crazy, like it's almost like summoning the demon out of you. Like things are only gonna scale worse. So don't try to tell your sympathetic nervous system, your survival mode, to calm down, or tell that part of yourself that is crazy, because it's only gonna make things worse. So we gotta be more strategic, but especially more compassionate than that. And we begin by understanding that survival mode is there to prevent us from having any pain. And because what follows pain is something worse that could end with you. So we need to first listen to our survival mode, to our sympathetic nervous system. Like, is there any threat or pain? No, there is not. But if you're thirsty, that's a signal of danger because you will end up dehydrated. If you're fatigued, that's a signal of danger because you are depleting your vitality, your energy. So we need to start by listening our our basic autonomic nervous system and taking decisions based on that lead to safety. Because when we are safe, then this autonomic autopilot nervous system can shift to the other side, which is parasympathetic dominance, which is about maintenance, digestion, rest, pleasure amplification. Okay? So, how does that look in comparison? A good versus a bad approach to work with the pelvic floor. So, a bad approach is one that triggers your survival mode. That is, for example, like Kegels or like any other exercise with a format with counts, like 3 sets in X amount of time or whatever, puts you in survival mode because this is a very intimate area of the body and it's prescriptive and it's forceful in that usually it doesn't involve you contemplating your sensations to see if you get like self-consent, like a willingness from your whole body. And the key thing is that a bad approach is forceful. It's about this attitude of making it happen. I'm gonna make my pelvic floor work. And this kind of forcefulness can actually be super detrimental for the pelvic floor because the pelvic floor also, it doesn't work in isolation. The pelvic floor is part of the core system. And if you try to force it in isolation, it's going to break havoc in the rest of the system and it's going to break the connection that makes a synergy in the core system. So, what's a good approach to work with the pelvic floor? Is an approach that first and foremost ensures safety, and not just like a trendy word. I mean, safety that is a context that your autonomous, unconscious nervous system interprets as safe. So you can operate on parasympathetic dominance and can experience the natural ways of doing of your whole body, especially in the pelvic floor. So, as I mentioned before, the pelvic floor is part of the core system, which its main role is to breathe, meaning every time you breathe, your pelvic floor works. whether you're aware of it or not. And as we breathe 22,000 times a day, the pelvic floor is already working. So actually, we don't want to put more load and more stress into the pelvic floor, especially if there's like a disconnection or dysfunction, like it's uh, too loose, the pelvic floor, or too tight. We don't want to put more stress to that. Instead, we want to, instead of that forceful make it happen approach of Kegels or prescriptive exercise, we need an approach that is consistent with the parasympathetic dominance in the nervous system that your pelvic floor needs, which is non-performative and which is actually a let it happen approach where you only avoid messing with the natural pattern of the pelvic floor along breathing, along the core system. We're almost done with the theory. I know it's heavy. You have this episode to rewind and watch as many times as possible, but it's very important that you know the facts, because the solution lies right there in knowing the facts. So all of this to say that especially when it comes to the pelvic floor, we need to be able to make a division between the subjective and the objective reality in regards our pelvic floor. So subjective reality is what we may think or other people may think about something, like concepts and taboo. And an objective reality is a fact that is regardless of your opinion. Like the sky is blue, whether I like it or no. And someone else can say, no, the sky is like green or orange or whatever. And it's like, no, it's a fact that the sky is blue and that plants photosynthesize and they are green. That's or gravity. Like if you jump into a swimming pool, we know what's gonna happen. You're gonna fall because of into the water because of gravity. Whether you want it or not, or believe it of no, or not, that's a fact. So making this distinction allows us to create this very important context of safety for working with the pelvic floor. And in short, what will bring safety to your nervous system is to relate to the pelvic floor through the facts, which are your physical sensations or lack of thereof. So you either feel or you don't feel physically. And if you feel, you can elaborate on that. And what we don't want is the other thing that is the subjective reality that has to do with emotions. Like the taboos, like here in Mexico, like if you touch your pelvic floor or see the pelvic floor or have pleasure with the pelvic floor or have a baby outside of marriage through your pelvic floor, then it's a sin and you go to hell. Well, that's crap. That's a lie. That's a myth. That's subjective reality, and we need to constantly put it aside, because even if you like have had a very lucky wonderful life, there's still all this noise in our culture that messes up with how we relate with our own body, especially with the pelvic floor. So again, we want to identify, oh, okay, this is an emotion in regards to my exploration with the pelvic floor, and I'm gonna put it aside and I'm gonna just focus on the sensations. And what sensations do we want? We want only sensations of pleasure. Why? Because this is about safety first and foremost and consent. And if there's any moment where you feel even the tiniest sensation of pain, you need to stop. Why? Because nothing that hurts you should be allowed, not even by yourself, not even if it's uncomfortable. We don't even want discomfort. So this no pain, no gain idea, it's just take it out, throw it to the bin. And also for the nervous system, remember, pain will trigger survival response. We want to run and operate with pleasure as our compass, to be on this other side of the parasympathetic dominance that is going to help us restore the functioning of the pelvic floor. So here are the 3 sensual restoration exercises. The first one is to practice getting rid of taboo, and is just sensing your pelvic floor every time you go to the bathroom. The second exercise is about restoring your pelvic floor sensitivity through noticing your breath, resonance down to the pelvic floor. And the third exercise is about self-consent, whether you decide to allow yourself or not to welcome the pleasure in your pelvic floor. So let's elaborate on this. The first exercise is to just be aware of the physical sensations in your pelvic floor every time you go to the bathroom. So we use the pelvic floor to go to the bathroom and to not go to the bathroom 24/7. Like the pelvic floor is what closes the doors from everything that goes out, from pee and from poop. So if you're not going to the bathroom, it's because your pelvic floor is contracted and keeping everything inside the body. And when you go to the bathroom, things go out from the pelvic floor because the pelvic floor relaxes and lets go. So every time you go to the bathroom, just notice like, okay, how does it feel to urinate? How does it feel to drop a poop? And that's it. And that's a great context first to have a clear sensation of the pelvic floor muscles. And it's just a simple physiological, necessary for health event, and a great opportunity to clean yourself out of taboos. Second exercise is to restore the sensitivity of your pelvic floor by noticing the resonance of your breathing movement all the way down to the pelvic floor. So we breathe in our thoracic cavity inside the rib cage where the lungs are. But in order for the lungs to have space and expand and take air in, this very important muscle that is the diaphragm, the primary muscle of respiration, contracts and pushes all the digestive organs from our abdominal cavity down. That's why when you inhale, your belly inflates a little bit. It doesn't inflate, it pops because of the movement of your viscera. So it's not only that your belly expands when you inhale. If you pay close attention, your pelvic floor will also let go a little bit and expand down. But it's a tiny bit of 1, maximum 2 millimeters range of movement between the bones of your pelvis, allowing your pelvic floor to move. So it's like a really small movement. And this is why this is the best context to restore the sensitivity in your pelvic floor. Remember, we want to do less, to stay in this other side of our nervous system that is the parasympathetic dominance. Because in the moment that we start to force things, to try to clench and feel more harder, faster, and more furious vaginal weightlifting or whatever, we're gonna throw all our progress through the bin because we would already be sending ourselves to the other side of the autonomic nervous system, which is survival mode, what we don't want. So again, we are actually working with the pelvic floor by dismantling tensions, by softening, by letting go all the gripping, by elaborating on the safety in our lives so we can open and trust more, so we can regain the trust of our own flesh in us. We want the body, this unconscious part of ourself, to trust us, that we are not gonna put it into survival mode to prevent pain, that we are not gonna induce pain in ourselves. On the contrary, that we are gonna ensure safety, well-being, pleasure, delight. So that's why this second exercise is so important, because most likely on your first explorations, you're gonna hit the hard wall of numbness, of realizing, wow, I don't feel anything in my pelvic floor. And you gotta understand, when have you asked your pelvic floor to communicate with you a sensation simply breathing? It's almost as if you have ignored your best friend for decades, and now you're meeting that person and you are expecting that person to express all their deepest sensations. Gotta be patient, gotta regain that trust in self again. How? Again, patience, safety, curiosity. Okay, and the third exercise is about pleasure, and how you practice welcoming the pleasure in your pelvic floor. You do that via self-consent. So it's simply asking yourself, okay, this may be pleasurable by default, but am I ready to welcome that pleasure? Am I ready to take in the pleasure that I feel in the pelvic floor? Because let's be aware also of this, like, anatomical fact. The pelvic floor is a highly innervated area in our body. It has lots of terminal endings. It's not only just the floor of our body with all that huge responsibility of keeping your digestive organs inside in your body and not let them fall and splash between your ankles. So that's a big responsibility. And on top of that, you have the sphincters. So the nervous system needs to let the pelvic floor know with accuracy when to open and let things out, and when to close and let and keep things in, because you are at dinner, on a dinner with a royal family or whatever, so you don't want to even fart the pelvic floor. You want to keep it closed. And then you add the layer of intimacy and arousal and sexuality, which leads to pregnancy, delivery, postpartum, etc., hormonal changes. And in all of that, the nervous system is involved. So there's a huge, like, wiring infrastructure to feel physically immense sensations of the pelvic floor. And all of them have to be pleasurable as a byproduct of a healthy functioning. If there's pain in the pelvic floor, it's because there's something wrong. And you gotta go to the gynecologist or to the psychologist, etc. So self-consent is about, even if you already feel pleasure, you need to ask yourself if you really are ready to give yourself permission to delight based on how safe you feel to let go, to open, and to welcome that pleasure, which is sensuality. Remember, has two sides. It's about the receptive aspect of sensing the pleasure, and then it has the active aspect of expressing that pleasure. So it's like even even urinating is extremely delightful. Just remember the last time that you were driving on a jam and you were like about to pee, like you felt that you were already turning yellow and that you had yellow waves in your eyes and you like really wanted to find a toilet, and then you finally find a gas station with a toilet and you go to the bathroom and it's like, oh, you urinate like for 2 3 minutes. It feels like an eternity, and it's extremely delightful, extremely pleasurable just to pee, because that pleasure ensures that every time you need to pee, you go pee, and you need that to stay alive. Remember, this part that has to do with pain and pleasure, with survival mode and rest and digest, is very primitive. It's necessary to keep you alive. So that's one thing. Things related with the pelvic floor are pleasurable. But you need to ask yourself if this is a good moment for you to welcome that pleasure. It has to be self-consensual. And where do you explore your self-consent? Well, with the other previous two exercises. Every time you go to the bathroom, you say, yes, I want to feel the pleasure, and you just delight. It's a private thing. And then with exercise number 2, like lean back, lay, and be in a state of idleness, just existing, sensing how your pelvic floor naturally expands when you inhale and how it naturally draws inside your body when you exhale, and how pleasurable this very nuanced movement is. So that's the practice. That's how you restore pelvic floor sensitivity to pleasure, especially when you have a certain neurospiciness, such as ADHD or CPTSD. And if you're ready to take this next step, the next step into embodying delight in your pelvic floor, I invite you to come to my free 2-hour class that I'm giving in 48 hours this Thursday. And it's about the 5 pelvic floor mistakes that ruin intimate sensitivity and make you lick pee, plus how to fix them and increase pleasure. Just click the link in the description to save your free seat, and I'll be very happy to see you there. And until then, remember to take the time to sense your fire so you can share the flame.